Hello and welcome to John Keim's podcast. He didn't do the first intro correctly, so like Eric Bieniemy with a botched huddle at training camp, we made him go back and do it again, and he didn't do it well the second time, so here comes the second team. This is Sam Fortier with the Washington Post. Welcome in. We've also got Pete Hailey on the Derek Jeter retirement tour and Matthew Paris.
And you can
find and John Keim also, I guess.
Yeah, I am here. But you can find me, the podcast, on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, or you can just kind of bop Sam Fortier in the nose right there. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. You can always read my work on ESPN.com. You can find Matthew Paris at WashingtonTimes.com. Pete Hailey's got a new job he's going to tell you about. And I don't care if you find Sam Fortier's work. So let's get to it, fellas. How are you guys?
Woo!
There we go.
That's banger of an open.
It is a banger of an open.
Let's get it going.
Sweet. I don't know how much longer we can make this retirement tour last. So
right, because as many of you know, this will be the last time the four youngest reporters on the beat will be together on the podcast. So I think it's just. But really, Pete, because as many of you know, Pete is leaving to join NBC Sports up in Stamford, Connecticut, and has a new job. So, Pete, let's start with that. We're going to get into all the Commander stuff, what these guys thought of training camp or so far, getting into the Browns preseason opener, et cetera, Eric Bieniemy, all that stuff. Pete, but tell them where you're going right now, just so we can get that out of the way.
Yeah, I'll be quick because I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, and this is actually the second goodbye podcast I've been on with Paris. So the goodbye tour is lengthy. I'm going to all the away ballparks, getting all the gifts. Real quick, joining NBC Sports in Stamford, Connecticut as a researcher for their golf studio shows, their golf products, their golf broadcasts, and also to work on Football Night in America, which leads into Sunday Night Football every week. So really exciting, but I'm going to miss these three idiots and the other people who are brave / crazy enough to cover the Commanders. So thank you, Keim, for having me on one more time.
And, so people should know too, because obviously this is a competitive beat, and it really is. And everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody wants to have that story, get that news or whatever, but you can also have fun, enjoy the people you're working around while still competing with them. And so I think that's why, I couldn't find people that I like. So I have these guys on, but seriously, like you can enjoy the beat because it's a very tough beat. And this has been a very tough beat over the last several years. And, these guys have been there covering all that stuff. So anyway, that's why it's always sad to see a guy like Pete go, but Pete, I know you like our bits. And so we'll probably, send you some snapshots of whatever bits we have. And, hey, if you can hold on 1 second, I got to take this call. Hey, what's up?
Oh my God.
All right. Yeah. Hold on. I'm doing a show. I'll call you back afterwards.
Let's hope people don't watch the YouTube.
All right.
version.
So for all you people who stuck with us after that lame banana YouTube phone joke. Anyway, let's get to the Commanders on the field. So, and Matt, remember to use your outside voice on this show.
Yeah, please.
But so let's go around the horn. Well, Sam, we can start with you. In general, thoughts almost 3 weeks into training camp, 2.5 weeks or so. What has been your big takeaway so far?
My big takeaway, it's pretty boring and basic, but I think that the defense has looked really good, and Chase Young and the rest of the defensive line I thought has looked up to the potential. The defensive backs, I'm curious how they're going to ultimately find that balance, because I think with a lot of different packages, they can do a lot of different things. One really good example of that is Benjamin St-Juste has mostly been at the nickel position with Rashad Wildgoose behind him. The other component of that, I think, is that the offense is looking a little better. There's been moments, and Sam Howell, I thought today, which I believe is Tuesday, although it all blends together during camp, had some really nice throws, but ultimately the offense has lagged behind. And Eric Bieniemy, I know that's probably something we'll get into a little later in the show, but with him, can this offense kick into high gear early on, and can this team not start slow?
What do you think, Matty P?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the up and down nature of Sam Howell throughout camp has been really, I think, expected, but it has been jarring when it is super down. That one Friday practice, was his worst by a mile, but he has rebounded since then. And besides the offense, or speaking of the offense, Eric Bieniemy's kind of constant yelling, getting on players, attention to details, it was really obvious in the spring, but I'm curious now how it'll hold up throughout an entire season, and maybe it's recency bias with Ron Rivera's comments today, but it has stood out to me to see whether this can actually hold and what kind of impact it makes once the season begins.
I will land on Emmanuel Forbes's just early impressions. I think he's going to be the most impactful first-round pick for this team since Robert Griffin III in 2012 in terms of what they do in their rookie year. And I know Chase Young was Defensive Rookie of the Year, 7.5 sacks, made a bunch of plays around the goal line. I think Forbes will be above Chase Young, and he can't be as impactful as RG3. RG3 changed the whole city, but close-ish to it in terms of just transforming a defense. I think he's the real deal. No concerns about the weight. So much excitement over the potential, the tools, the speed, and he's also just a really mature guy already. So I loved what I saw from Emmanuel Forbes in Ashburn.
He's a smart kid. I think he's a smart corner. That's what always jumped out at me when you watch him play in college, that some of those plays he's making it's from film study. And I think you see that on the field here. The one thing that stood out to me too, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, because you guys have been around now for a couple of years, the practices have had more urgency. And there's been more intensity, and there have been some longer practices and a higher volume of plays. And some of that is the impact of Bieniemy as his offense coordinator coming and making some suggestions. But it does feel like it's been a more intense or purposeful training camp than the last couple of years. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. I'll start. I asked today, I couldn't remember how long the practices were last year, and they were an hour 45 and sometimes like up to 2 hours and 20 minutes. These guys have averaged about 2.5 hours, at least when the pads are on. So it has been really jarring on how they're going about it. And I think John Bates used the word, they want to be situational masters. And I think that's a good phrase for it, just because of how much they focus on specific areas. I've enjoyed watching how much red zone work they've been doing it in around the goal line. And I think you really kind of start to see that precision, that timing starting to improve because they're focusing on it over and over and over.
And I can see how excited you get while you're sitting on that tree stump over by the field.
Yeah. As long as it's
but it's true. What's the impact of all that, Pete? What do you think? I mean, do you think it has been more intense?
Oh, definitely. I wish we could set this up, have Eric Bieniemy travel back in time to last year and watch Carson Wentz overthrow running backs in like the first 10 minutes of practice when we were all standing there like, is this a real NFL team? Is this what should be happening? Bieniemy would lose his damn mind. He gets pissed off at the smallest of things. So practices are way more intense. I think the increased presence of fans also has that consequence of raising the guy's focus and intensity level. And it's got to help. I mean, details matter, as cliche and as lame as that is. Details matter in every job. And if you have someone who's over your shoulder screaming at you about the details, sure, you might get kind of pissed about that and it might wear on you, but it's also going to make you more aware of how to hone in on those things and make fewer mistakes.
That's Keim to Sam.
Sam?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are two things I think that stand out to me here. The first is the conditioning. Antonio Gibson talked about he has not practiced this hard since he's been in the NFL, and particularly for a guy who has struggled with his conditioning at times in the past. I think that this is, it's really positive to hear him say that I'm in really, really good shape. And it's not like, I don't think it's the annual training camp, I'm in the best shape of my life. Like, he actually does look, I think, a little bit better than he has been in years past. The second thing is when we talk about situational, it's not just, hey, like this is the landmark I have to hit in the end zone or in the red zone and in sort of the players on the field. I think one of the things that stood out to me is 2-minute drill from the other day. And they've struggled. The first team offense has really struggled in 2-minute. And I think that's probably because, they haven't been able to use as much, play action or RPO, as much gadgetry as they have otherwise. But they got down to, I believe it was like the 25 or 30, and there was 9 seconds left. And the clock stopped, and Eric Bieniemy ran on the field. It was like, why did the effing clock stop? And one of the only times I've seen him kind of pump the brakes in this training camp was when Ron Rivera said, because I called a timeout.
Yeah.
And Bieniemy was like, my bad, coach, my bad. But then, it was Eric Bieniemy, Ron Rivera, and the head of analytics, Doug Drury, and they basically were talking about, okay, if we have 9 seconds and we have one timeout, do we spike the ball, stop the clock, take a shot to the end zone? Do we call the timeout and try to, hit something quick or do we not call the timeout, hit something quick over the middle for a closer field goal, call the timeout? How do we game plan these situations? And I think that's going to be really fascinating, because when I asked Ron Rivera about it afterwards, he said Eric Bieniemy seems like he always wants to be aggressive, and without the high-flying Chiefs offense, are they still going to be as aggressive as Eric Bieniemy wants to?
Sam, do you have the head of analytics on speed dial on 1, 2, 3, 4, all of your numbers? Like, how often do you talk to this guy? It seems like he's probably your best friend already.
The guy's numbers.
When I wore the I Love True Media shirt that you got me, he pointed at me, he pointed at me, he's like, my guy.
But that is a good point, though, because there's a lot. The details are the biggest thing that I've seen. And as you know, like, situational football matters, and they haven't been good in the red zone. They weren't as good on third downs, and those are areas where they focused a lot this summer. So, is this team more positioned after just a couple of weeks watching? Are they more positioned to get off to a better start because of all this work?
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I should get tiebreaker, go to the guy leaving the beat. So anytime I step over you guys, please defer to me. I would say between the increased intensity and also next week's Ravens practices, where you're going up against a different team as opposed to just the same Commanders jerseys day after day, I think that's going to help them start fast. Also, playing the Cardinals with Colt McCoy is a elixir for slow starts too, but then there are some tougher opponents after that. So I don't know why, Ron, it took them so long. I mean, I kind of understand why it took them so long to find a partner between Ashburn's facilities being limited and COVID, but it's really good that they have this matchup now with Baltimore, get some really quality work. Then the third game, you let the backups figure it out, and then hopefully the starters can capture that momentum, beat the hell out of the Cardinals, and take care of some more business in September.
Go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was gonna say, I just think by outwardly talking about it and making it a focal point, it could have an effect too. Think about what the defenders have said, and so many guys on this defense have said, Jack Del Rio in meetings have said, start fast, start fast, start fast. And last year the message was humility in trying to handle their success better. And I think as last season went on and when things started to improve, they didn't buy into their own hype, that they started to kind of be grounded. And I think that had an effect. And so, you look at this defense, a lot of the pieces are the same. I think maybe they'll have to work out some kinks with Benjamin St-Juste in the slot, but honestly, St-Juste might be having the best camp of anyone on the roster. So
look good. You're right.
I think because the continuity is there, I think this defense in particular has a chance to start really fast. The offense, we'll see.
All right, Sam.
Best camp on the roster, and Pete's take about Emmanuel Forbes is the best since RG3. Like, you guys are coming in with some spicy takes. I didn't realize.
Well, something's on fire behind Paris there. Look at that.
Yeah.
I went the anti-Russell lighting. I wanted to be properly lit.
Good job.
I think that the attention to detail will help, but I also think that a thing that people might be overlooking is they will be better in the red zone because they have Sam Howell at quarterback. And I'm not saying that because of Carson Wentz. I'm saying that because last year when they struggled deep in the red zone, I think a lot of that, I think a significant portion of that was because of Taylor Heineke's arm strength. And that's not to knock on the guy, because I think that he, played really well. But in that Giants game, in the second Giants game in Washington, I think that was one of the problems. And obviously the play calling wasn't great either. But when you have a guy that can fit it into tight windows on a 5-yard out, as we've seen Sam Howell do to Terry McLaurin against a guy with length like Emmanuel Forbes, the coaching will help, but also I think the talent, the arm talent, is going to help a lot too, particularly in the red zone.
So, and I think the emphasis on getting Logan Thomas back involved down there, the tight ends in general, will also be a big factor. Let's talk about Bieniemy, because I think this is going to air either Wednesday or Thursday, and so I didn't want to start with that because we're going to move past that. And I think my guess is that we're going to talk about this, and then Wednesday morning, Ron Rivera is going to come out and say hey, I don't think you guys, it's not exactly what I meant to say. So let's take all that into account. But we're going to go off of what was said today, what was discussed. How big an issue is this? Could this be? Is it one? And from what and from what angle?
I don't think it's as big of an issue in terms of players, hitting Bieniemy, or it could wear on them. I could see it wearing on them if the season goes off the rails and, everyone's losing, everyone's in a bad mood. Then Bieniemy style may be grating. I think the more interesting, there are two parts of it. The first is that kind of subtle conflict, if you can even call it conflict, between Rivera and Bieniemy of whose team this is by tailoring so much to Bieniemy. I think Rivera, whether intentionally or not, kind of sent a message that this is still his team, that he's still kind of the head coach in charge. Sam, I actually think the timeout example you brought up, even though they were laughing and joking about it, is another reminder that, Rivera ultimately makes that last call. And then the second is just, has Bieniemy's demanding coaching style, his intensity, has that actually contributed into him not getting head coaching jobs? And how much is he willing to change that as the season goes on? Because I actually thought the second part of Rivera's quote today about how him and Jack Del Rio have learned to adjust to players' personalities was much more interesting than the players coming to Rivera and saying that they might have some complaints or concerns about Bieniemy's coaching style.
Right. And I think that's a good point too, because I think if you put the period after enlightening, it's not as big a deal. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I would certainly echo those comments. And one of the things that stuck out to me is during the practice that got the chippiest, there were two examples where Benjamin St-Juste had PBUs against, the first one was against Dax Milne, and he went to dap up Dax afterwards as kind of I think a taunting thing, and Terry McLaurin did not like that. And then right after that, in the next period, Cole Turner had a play over the middle. Benjamin St-Juste broke it up, and then when Cole Turner put his hand out to get helped up, St-Juste just stood over him. And then Terry McLaurin went over there and took his helmet off and started getting after Benjamin St-Juste. Eric Bieniemy obviously did not like that and was basically saying, shut the F up and get back to the play, get back in the huddle, run the play, don't get distracted. And then Terry McLaurin, who was on the other side of the formation, motioned across next to Bieniemy. And Terry said, basically, you can't do that to a teammate, bro, to Bieniemy. And I'm not saying that those two were locking heads, but I think that in that moment, Eric Bieniemy was not turning off Eric Bieniemy, because that, he's going to say that when Nick Gates throws a ball, he's going to say that when Terry says something. But in that moment, I think Terry was trying to say to him, it was important for me to say that because that's my teammate. Those are both my teammates, right, and they can't do that to each other. And I'm a leader on this team, and I'm stepping up and saying that. So again, I'm not saying there's a rift between them or that there's friction, but that was a moment where that was a specific anecdote that I think that Ron Rivera was talking about when he's talking about Eric Bieniemy is who he is, whereas Jack and him have maybe learned to tailor it to some of the players.
And a little bit. And I think also in that case, because when he said I think he was also looking at the entire offense initially, because it wasn't just because Terry was getting upset, but others were as well. So I think a lot of that was directed wholly. And then Terry had the exchange. I also think that between guys like Terry and Bieniemy, and I don't know if they did this, but that's one of the things. It's hey man, you talk later and you say okay, I got you. You know what I mean? I think that knowing those two especially, but I don't know, but Pete, you've been around this a while. How could this manifest itself? And again, is there any concern on your end about how it might play out here?
Definitely concern, like Paris said, if it starts off poorly, or if they're 4-8 and it's cold as hell in Ashburn and people don't want to be out there and Bieniemy's just grilling these guys constantly. I could see that getting pretty tiresome. But at the same time, it's on these guys to be professional. He's your coach. He's trying to make you better. They need to realize that. It's a huge contrast compared to what Scott Turner was. And even last year between Turner, Del Rio, and Rivera, while Del Rio and Rivera have these defensive backgrounds, they don't really come across as complete hardos when we're out there. So you have three kind of relaxed guys. I think I can count on one or two fingers, let alone hands, how many times I've heard Del Rio out of practice. You never hear him. It's gone from a quiet practice field to Bieniemy can be heard all the way into the gravel parking lot that's 8 miles away and gives Ben Standig a heart attack every morning. So it's going to take an adjustment, but the players need to adjust. The way they've been doing things in the past hasn't worked. It's a new attempt to do things. So try this. And also, lastly, I think it's on Ron a lot of not knowing how to keep this in house. This did not need to be explained so much. And it's like when he said the quarterback comment to Paris last year, and it sparked a Monday night countdown segment, and Archie3 and Alex Smith are talking about it. Like, we love it because it gives us something to do, but at the same time, it almost makes you roll your eyes because it's like, okay, this didn't need to be the thing. We could have just talked about Bieniemy and Sam Howell, but now we have to talk about all this other stuff. Go talk to other players about it, get reactions. So it becomes a headache. And Ron has been creating headaches a lot for a guy who pretends to be so. Let's only talk about what's important and not what's interesting.
I also wonder when, because right now it's all a job interview with new owners. And so I wonder how all that gets processed. I think, you can certainly move past this. This isn't I don't think it's a hard one to move past, but you have to have success. And I think, yeah, I mean, sometimes there are unforced errors, and there you go. Let's go on to another one, because we probably only have about 10 minutes. And I know you guys have dinner reservations, and I appreciate the invite. I can't make it. I'm sorry to tell you guys that. Gonna have to sit this one out.
Josh and Magic and Mitchell and all those guys are coming. We had a table for 8, but Mark Ian called last minute, and it's going to be us and one other guest.
They must be taking his helicopter from my backyard to get there on time. So
the adventure park is ziplining through the trees. It's climbing from platform to platform. It's even an axe throwing competition with your friends. But what the adventure park really is opportunity. Reconnecting with friends and family, accomplishing a challenge, and making lasting memories. So book your visit today and choose your own adventure.
All right. So let's look at when you look at, is there a perception you guys had of this team going into camp that maybe has changed after a few weeks?
While my comrades here pause a second, I'll say my hope for the defense has gone up a little bit because of Forbes, because of Chase Young, and because of just how deep the secondary looks overall. They have so many guys. I think they're going to cut 1 or 2 players who they otherwise would have kept in previous years, and they're going to have a lot of options to move people around. But that increase in optimism for the defense is probably offset overall by decrease in optimism for the offense, between Howell being, I think, a little more down than up, and the up not necessarily being as high as I would like, and the offensive line looking sketchy, having some health issues already with Sadiq Charles. Like, I think those offset, so I'm still at 8 or 9 wins. And then if they get more turnovers, if they get lucky on offense with Sam Howell doing something I'm not prepared for, then they can get to double digits, hopefully.
Keim, are you going to ask what perceptions have not changed after this?
You can go that way too. If you want to go that way, that's fine.
Because
I want to ask about the preseason game after this. So go ahead. If you want to go that way, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll do 2 quick ones then. The thing that has changed for me is I think that the more I see him in pads, the more that I like the signing of Cody Barton. At first, I was like kind of unimpressed, like, he's Cole Holcomb by a different name, basically. Same number of letters in his first name, both begins with C, whatever. But then I think that he is a more fluid linebacker. He looks like he's more comfortable at his size, where I think Cole was shifting from outside. And I know that, he played safety when he was younger. And so I think that, to me, Cody Barton looks like a guy that's going to be pretty solid in the middle, especially because I think Jamin has been a little underwhelming in camp. The perception that has not changed is I'm still pretty concerned about this offensive line. Pete touched on the health and the Sadiq Charles angle, but regardless of health, I think that interior is a complete mystery. Nick Gates, didn't play center a ton. There were some snap things early in camp. I think Andrew Wiley needed a lot of, help in terms of chips and doubles and scheme in Kansas City. And he was the 5th best starter on that line. And now he's expected to be 2nd or 3rd. So those are probably the 2 quick takeaways I'd share.
What do you say, Matty P?
I think for me, the way that the secondary lines up, I actually think we're going to see a lot more Percy Butler in those 3-man sets than maybe I expected going into camp. I think Quan Martin has had a little bit of a quieter role than I would have thought for a 2nd-round pick. He's pretty much been Cam Curl's backup in that Buffalo nickel role. And Cam Curl, of course, didn't participate in spring OTAs for team drills. So I think that's going to be different. And then Yeah, that would be the main thing, is that the secondary looking a little bit different, and then I think we'll see a lot of Forbes, and I think he'll have a big impact.
Yeah, and it's funny because like I like Quan Martin, but it's like you're going to need to get. And I think they're going to have a role for him, but I also wonder what that role is, because you need to have second or third and fourth round picks. You've got to get some contributions from those guys. So I think they will from Quan, but yeah, that I think part of the thing for him is, and the good thing for them, guys like Forrest have improved. Percy Butler's improved. And so I think it adds to their versatility, but I don't know how deep his role is going to be at this point. What about, let's turn the attention to Friday preseason opener. Again, we don't know as of taping this how much guys are going to play, but are there some things that you guys are really looking for in particular, or even maybe some guys that we know are going to play who are not, maybe fighting for jobs? Is there a position battle you're looking at? Is there a position in particular when you look at Friday?
If Sadiq Charles plays, I think the left guard is one, and how that unit looks together. Like, are they going to be better than the sum of their parts? I think the fifth defensive back spot, like we've talked about, like, who is going to play at the nickel? I know that'll be matchup based, but what does that rotation look like? I'm also pretty curious. I know that the defensive line is pretty loaded, but to me, you have 5 defensive ends in F.A. Obata, Casey Tuhill, James Smith-Williams, and the 2 draft picks this year, KJ Henry and Andre Jones. You can probably only keep 3 or 4 of those guys. So who impresses? And then the tight end, the tight end room, like if you don't have Logan Thomas, like, is Alex Arma going to step up? Curtis Hodges, he's had some drops in camp. What does that look like? What does that room look like? Because they will play a huge role in this offense, particularly with blocking.
I was totally dismissive of Alex Arma at like the beginning of camp because they've had him forever. And by the end of it, I was like, they seem to like him and want to use him in a million ways. And I don't know if I would do it, but I'm not dismissing Alex Arma anymore, being somewhat of an important player, which is a weird thing to say. For Friday, I've always been a receivers guy. And while I don't necessarily care about the back end battles, because these players make the team and then they get waived immediately or they stay inactive for 6 weeks or something, I want to see if De'Ami Brown, who I think has had a decent camp and has shown more than I expected, if he can bring that to the field. I remember last year against Kansas City, Sam Howell targeted him a bunch, including a couple times downfield, and Brown just couldn't come up with it. So I want to see De'Ami actually take it to the field. And then I want to see Kaz Allen both as a returner if they let him, but also as a receiver. He did some good things in some one-on-ones when I was watching him. That's catered towards receivers. So can he get open against opposing DBs in the slot and make some yards after the catch, which would be a very nice thing because they've had Dax Milne and those types of players who don't get much yak.
Yeah, I want to see the right side of the line. You hit on the left guard competition, but I
Harris going right. Nobody's surprised by that, by the way.
Washington Times is finest, baby.
Oh, God. Anyway, ignoring that, I think Sam Cosmi has been maybe their most consistent lineman in camp, and him being at guard, I think is really interesting. See how Wiley holds up. If we want to go obscure wide receivers and that sort of thing, Mitchell Tinsley and that Jake Fromm connection, I'm interested to see whether that goes to the field.
Yeah, definitely.
Fromm, by the way, said the other day, Pete, that Mitchell Tinsley was his go-to target in man coverage. So,
oh God, that makes me want to puke. All right,
there's some betting going on there. So but yeah, you can listen to the other podcast for that one.
Yes.
Are you done, Matt? Or you want to go?
That's it. No, that's fine.
Can I circle back and have another one? Because I thought that either of you were going to hit on Sam Howell as the obvious one, and I was trying to leave that. But
I'm actually really interested in the kicking battle too.
Yeah.
But the problem with the hard thing with Howell is that I think that, to me, the bigger test is the Ravens' practices.
You think the Ravens' practices are bigger just because he'll have more reps? Because
you're going to get more reps, more situational work. I think you can control that more. So I think that, yes, I think that will, because as of we're talking now, we don't know how much he's going to play. Is it a series? Is it 2 series? How much work? Now, if he goes out there and lights it up, that's great. But I just think that he's going to get more work in those 2 days. So you're going to get a lot to learn about him in that time.
Sure. I'm not saying that you won't learn things on Friday, or that you won't learn things in the camp, but I think Friday I'm interested in, does he get the ball out of his hands super quickly?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing in camp. I don't think he's processed and gotten the ball out super quickly where I think this offense will demand it, especially in quick game. I think that, his footwork, especially under center, can he, set the protections right? I think those are all things that I'm curious to see if he can do. Like, it's the mental processing stuff, because I think that we know he has that whole shot to Terry against cover 2, which you saw in Dallas. Like, he has that in his bag, and we know he's got the mobility in his bag, but mentally, where is he at?
And I listen, I want to see that. I just don't know, again, until we know how much he's going to play. That's the hard part to know. So, but yeah, if he goes out there and they look crisp like that, of course, that's what that's what they want to see. And that's what they need to see. And I think you can learn something from that. I just think the volume of work next week will tell us a lot. And it can, and also it could be, do you build on whatever you show Friday? Do they look more comfortable running their offense Friday because you're running against a defense that shouldn't be as good as what this one is? You're running, so I think there's a lot of reasons, a lot of things you can still get out of him, without a doubt. So, got anything else, Pete?
Just how often they target the running backs, between Gibson and Robinson. Will they throw to them a bunch? That seems to be a theme of camp. And how does Chris Rodriguez look, assuming he gets some of those reps in the second half? So do the running back throws come, and not just in the flats or in screens, but do they try and, get them involved a little bit more downfield, especially with Gibson? Do they ever split them out wide?
There you go, fellas. That's all I got. I know you guys got your reservations. So again, I appreciate the invite. I'm going to have to decline once again. I appreciate the text, Sam. You said you wanted someone to liven it up tonight, and I'm going to have to pass. So
yeah.
I know I'm the in case of emergency, break glass, bring the party guy out. I got it. Keep everybody young.
Hey, I'm going to be fifth wheeling this date. So if you and your girl want to come, that you'd be more than welcome.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
I'm going to be your date. All
right. Anyway, listen, before we go off the rails again here, I appreciate you guys coming on, Pete. Going to miss you a lot. And so, anytime you want to come on, just, you're out of luck. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll just record a Zoom by myself. And
just send it in. Just text me and I'll read some stuff on the air. If you got, I do these mailbag Zooms. You want to send in a question, I'm happy to answer it. Pete H from Stanford wants to know, how are the bits in the press room? So
I love that.
You should make that a recurring bit.
But yes, but that would be good. But we will miss you, Pete. And I thank you guys for coming on. This is always one of my favorite podcasts to do. And I know, shout out to Mrs. Fortier listening to her son on the show. I hope we did well. So thanks, guys.
Oh yeah. See you, Keim. See you, Mrs. Fortier.
See ya.
We'll see.